How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, we're going to revisit once again the Emmanuel Haro case involving these two individuals, Jake Haro and Rebecca Haro. If you're not familiar with this case, on August 14th, Rebecca Haro made a false narrative saying that she was trying to change her baby's diaper in the Big Five parking lot and was snuck from behind by someone that said, "Hola." She got knocked out. When she came to, the baby was missing. She ran to the Big Five to report that her baby was taken. Jake Haro also was seen on video with the news, also, agreeing with the story and basically pleading for his baby to come back. That was done August 14th. On August 22nd, couple is arrested for murder. And as of now, or they're being charged with murder. As of now, the baby has yet to be found. Me and a couple of my guests have covered this topic multiple times. We have covered different angles. And the question I've been getting right now, and I guess it kind of runs parallel with what's happening in real time, is, I'll show you the question. Who talks first in the Emmanuel Haro case? Because I guess we're getting to a point now where, we may have two separate lawyers, and now we got the couple divided. So now the question is, who is going to fold under pressure? And as of right now, if you guys haven't been keeping up with the case, we already know Jake Haro has already been out there, right, trying to find the body with the police. Was it a goose chase, a wild goose chase, or was he really trying to make an attempt? The conference did say that they do believe they know where the body's expected to be. But as of now, they haven't found it. And there's a lot of theories out there. We're not going to run on every theory here, but what we're going to do is present to you a good show about how interviewing and interrogation works. We're going to use this as the backdrop. We're going to present a lot of probabilities here, a lot of possibilities that I think a lot of you may agree with, some you guys may not, because we are going to go very objective here. We're going to basically provide you with the show that's going to cover as many angles as we can. And I think you're going to find this very interesting, because in the process of us covering this, we're going to kind of teach you a little bit how the interview and interrogation process works. And that's why I have my guest today, Joseph Pangaro. And guys, if you check out some of my other videos, you'll see I've done videos on interview and interrogation. I've done one with Joe in the past about a guy that did a false confession. If you put down Richard Allen interrogation and Tear Talk, you'll find a video that I did breaking down how that interrogation worked, or the interview and interrogation worked. So I think we're going to have a really good show, a lot of stuff being thrown at you just for you to think about, just for you to have dialogue, and hopefully this grows. This grows us as we continue to follow true crime, and you never know. What we learn here could be applied to other cases. That's the key. So I got to bring Joe back on. So Joe, what up?
Hey, how are you, Anthony?
Joe, it's great to have you on again, Joe. Hey, Joe, this is definitely a great plug for your book. I know you wrote a book about investigation. So you mind introducing yourself to our audience once again?
Hello, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Joe Pangaro, retired. I spent a majority of my career in the investigative division of my police department. And as part of that, I have dealt with homicides, drug dealers, prostitution, fraud case, anything and everything when it comes to crime. And one of the things that we find is that I say this all the time, Anthony, and I throw this in here because I think it's going to frame what we're talking about here. Police work is a person-to-person business. We get information when we sit down and talk to people. We get information from physical gestures, from body language, the words that people use, all those kind of things. And that's where you can find out where somebody's at when you're talking to them.
And guys, there's definitely a lot to cover here. And guys, I really would recommend before you watch this that you have a somewhat of familiarity with this case, because we're also going to be talking about Jake's past a little bit, because Jake was charged with child cruelty back in 2023 for something he did in 2018 with a young girl named Promise Faith. Really left her 3% brain function, blind, can't walk, can't talk. This guy, as the police say in the conference, is he's an experienced child abuser. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down the process here. We are going to apply it in real time right now to the Emmanuel Haro case. So we're going to be focusing on Rebecca and Jake. So I think it's going to be interesting. But in the process, I guess it is more about the lesson. But I think this will be great for some dialogue, guys. If you guys want to put in the comments what your thoughts are or add to the dialogue, me and Joe are going to be very responsive. So again, it's who talks first, the Emmanuel Haro case. And just want to do a quick little overview where we're at. So the central question, this is what I've been getting from the video we did the other day. In cases with multiple suspects, who breaks first often determines the entire trajectory of justice. Emmanuel Haro's case, the context here is missing child, murder charges filed against Jake and Rebecca despite no body recovery. That's important because the body is the evidence. The psychological chess game. So 2 co-defendants, separate lawyers, mounting pressure. Someone's going to crack. All right, so we're kind of getting ahead of this right now. Key information points. Evidence appears strong enough for murder charges without a body. So again, that's interesting, and we discussed that in the other videos that we've done. Could be stuff that they found around the house, maybe something in Jake's car. There's rumored that there could have been something where he may have thrown out the body somewhere where they somewhere in the garbage or something. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on right now. I think the evidence was something that they found in the house. I truly believe that. Jake has more extensive criminal history, making him a primary target. That's why the bias right now in our coverage has been leaning towards Jake. And again, guys, this is not to minimize Rebecca's accountability, but we are going to cover things that paint Rebecca too in a not so favorable light, but also paints her maybe as a victim, but still a victim that has some level of accountability. So bear with us. Again, it's just approaching this in an objective fashion. Rebecca did create the false narrative that's now unraveling. We touched on that yesterday because she put herself in the center of a false narrative. And then the court incident. I wanted to bring up something too. Usually when they bring in co-defendants to court, they're not allowed to speak to each other. You like to say they're not allowed to look at each other, but you'll see quick little glances. And someone had said to me, hey Gans, what do you think about Rebecca with a quick look towards Jake? And I think that she wanted to look at Jake, but she also knew about the rules because I think someone probably told her, hey, you guys are co-defendants, you cannot speak. But Jake quickly told Rebecca when he entered the courtroom, I love you. And despite there should be no contact order possible. And I thought the reason why he did that was because he knew that there'd be no contact. And you got to remember something. When people want control, they got to keep you close to them. So with that said, Jake knows he's in a position now where they're not as close. They are separate. So I think the I love you literally is an attempt to maintain control. I don't think it was a sincere I love you. I think he yelled I love you because he knows that she could be a bit vulnerable. And he was using that to maintain some level of control over her. I just wanted to put that in there. I think that's going to be revisited in a bit. But Joe, let's get, I have 2 questions for this first segment here. So from your experience, when prosecutors have strong evidence but need a body or confession, how do they typically decide which suspect to pressure first?
All right, that's obviously crucial to what you're doing here. When you have, and the dynamics are different between family members, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, and friends, who you're dealing with, depending on who you're dealing with, because you have different relationship type of arrangements. So if you're talking about a situation like this, you have husband and wife, it is dependent on the relationship of the people. So you've already kind of brought that up. Was he trying to control her? We see she has a black eye. Could that be indicative of domestic violence or something going on in the back? We saw that he had previously injured this other child years ago in a way that's not what you would consider, an accidental thing. You might be angry and you hit a child and you didn't mean to hit him so hard and you injure them, but that child suffered significant injuries, which is indicative of a type of attack. So how do you pick the weak link? Well, you start that out by looking at what evidence you have to indicate who may have done what. And the person who did it, if it was the wife who did it, okay, if she did it out of a fit of rage, out of anger, of maybe she was intoxicated and she did something to the child and killed the child, you could see where the husband may want to protect her. And therefore, maybe he wasn't there when it happened. And she's going to be more vulnerable to interview techniques. You'd have to really sit with the people. So one of the things that I get a lot is people say, hey, did you see that show on TV, or did you see that news story? Who did it? Well, the bottom line is, because it's a very personal thing, you really need to sit with the people to kind of figure them out and look at them very closely. But in general, you're going to try and find the person that maybe emotionally will break. Because one of the notes I make here is that I think from movies and TV, that a lot of people that end up getting interviewed by the police for something serious like this, like a homicide, is that they're excellent. They're going to be smart. They're going to be able to withstand questioning. They're going to be able to control their body language. And in reality, most people are not master criminals. Most people got themselves into a situation. They maybe expected someone to die. Maybe they went to kill somebody, or maybe it just happened accidentally. And they're going to try their best to dance around answers. But the trained investigator, the person who understands the psychological underpinnings of what somebody's going through when they're involved in something, these are the things where you'll listen to the words, because words mean things. Then it's the context of the words, right? So when I look at this, I say, probably, if I had to look at this, I would say I would pick the mother to be the most vulnerable if she knew what happened. If she was there when it happened and she had all these facts, I would pick her because she's the mother. Now, for those people say, oh, that's sexist. The reality is a mother's protectiveness over the child is a very powerful thing. Doesn't mean fathers are not protective, but a mother's general responsibility to the child is usually so powerful that you can work on them to protect the child even in death. Okay, the child is dead. She knows the child's dead. Maybe he told her he killed the child, and now she's trying to save their lives. Maybe that's why they had that whole news conference, to try and get out from under this terrible thing. So I would talk to both people, figure out who I think is the most culpable. Then I'd look and see at the emotional makeup of each person, and then their connection to the victim. Depending on who the victim is going to make a difference too. And I don't mean to give you 90,000 different options, but that's really what you have when you're going in there. All of these unique factors, and that's what I call them, unique factors that build up to an interview, are going to determine exactly which way you go. In general, I would talk to the mother. If she did it, she's probably most likely to break down because she's not an expert. She's not a master criminal. If she's protecting the husband, I think she's more likely to break down and give us what she knows. The difference would be if she was not there when it happened, it's kind of hard for you to work through all those details when she's just going by what he told her. If it was him, and as the guy with a history of violence and being arrested before, I think he'd be a little bit harder to work. But again, he's not a master criminal either. And as we go through this whole process and we talk about the investigation and how we do it, there's ways that you work around that, because people always, when they're willing to talk to you, they're going to either tell you the truth or they're going to lead you down a primrose path to have you believe what they want you to believe.
And remember, there was a delay in the arraignment because they had to get two separate lawyers. They realized there'd be conflict if they both were represented by the same lawyer, same team, same legal counsel, same public defender's office. So I want to mention something here. So obviously Joe's talking about maybe with the mother, working on some guilt, some remorse, if it's there. Now, granted, there's a lot of people here that are watching it that still see the mother, not minimizing her accountability, but still see the mother as a victim at some level as well. But again, the ultimate victim is going to be Emmanuel. We know he's the ultimate victim. But, even if Emmanuel's the ultimate victim, doesn't mean that Rebecca can't be a victim either. So you have to be objective and you look at things. Now, granted, I know people look at me like, Gangi, Rebecca's a victim. She's a monster. Maybe, but she also could still be a victim to Jake's abuse. So we have to be fair and look at it and remind you guys that if I was the public, I would want answers, right? So obviously people put in for the murder charges, very extreme. Now, since they got two separate lawyers, the lawyer on Rebecca is going to be like, hey, listen, you know you didn't do this. You know, right now you're covering it up or whatever it is, but we got to really separate you from this murder charge. You know, we got to get it downgraded a little bit. We got to work on something. So let's talk about Jake's influence. Let's talk about, you know, who Jake really is, because obviously everybody's going to be looking at Jake anyway. So if I was the lawyer for Rebecca, I'm going to play into that past. You know, I'm going to play into Jake's history. And because I know right off the bat, that presents a huge bias, and they're going to be allowed to use it because they're pushing for that law. I think it's like 1109 or something that allows them to use this history now to go ahead and let you know, the jury, if they go to trial, whatever it is, or let the people know that this person has a history of that. And I think it also plays out well because if you never find a manual, this is the scary thing. If you never find a manual, the story of how cruel Jake can be is going to be what he did in 2018. And at that point, I believe that is very relevant to this case. I do. Some people may disagree because I got some people right now messaging me like that's unfair. It's not. He set that up himself. You know, that's like saying, like, you know, a guy that has a sex offense, you know, and gets caught having sex with another child. Okay, well, I don't want to use that past offense. It's a compulsive act. And I'm going to tell you something. Here's what you damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know, if that person doesn't tell you what they've done and you know, okay, now this kid does get sexually molested, you know, okay, well, that person's supposed to report it because that's supposed to give us the knowledge that we need to make a very informed decision. That should be played out as well with child cruelty. I think child cruelty should have some level of registration that allows for that knowledge to be brought out there because I think it is repetitive. I think it is very impulsive and very hard to control. I just think it becomes a default for some of these monsters. And another thing is, remember, one more thing. This is not about negotiating where Emmanuel's body is. I mean, yes, we want to know where that body is, but this is more about who's the one actually responsible for the murder? Who has what role in all of this? And that, to me, is where now you start to see the divide and conquer. That's where we're at now. And I think Jake knew that. And that's why he yelled, I love you in the courtroom, because he's trying still to maintain that control, even though they no longer have contact. So right now he's desperate, right? I mean, if I live in a house with Joe and we're a domestic couple and I have control by abusing him, whatever it is, he's right next to me. It's easier for me to exert my control. And I don't want nobody infected. I want no counter influence. I don't want them connected. I don't want Joe talking to his family. None of that. I am in total control. And I get very nervous the moment Joe gets a phone call or the moment someone wants to come into the house, because there are a moment that I get concerned that person can break my level of influence. Now, imagine if this is for longer term. Now there's no interaction at all. You don't think he's going to try to push the love card because he knows this woman loves her. So I have to lean on the fact that Rebecca may be the weaker one here, but Rebecca may be the one who was involved, but less involved. And I don't want people to misconstrue that. I got another question for you, John. Feel free to add on what I just said too. But the second question I got here is, what does it tell you when a suspect appears to be cooperating early on? So we saw that a little bit when Jake originally got arrested. Is that usually genuine or strategic?
We see this over and over and over again. Scott Peterson, he was part of the search crew looking for his wife. We see this regularly, that people who are involved want to set this front for themselves. Hey, look at me. I'm trying. I'm helping. I'm trying to find my child. I'm trying to find my wife. I'm trying to find whatever. It's a play because in most cases, it's a play because they're trying to, you know, I always say all the time, tell them what you want them to know. Well, that's what these people are doing. They're trying to set a stage. That's why they had the fake press conference. When I watched them talking, and again, this is what I talk about, 80% of human communication is through body language. When you watch body language, and I watched the mother, Rebecca, when I watched her talking about it, there were things there that were halting to me in the way she was crying and what she was saying. Now, again, so I'm saying sitting with the actual person gives you the clearest view. But just watching that was her performance. And it's all going to come down to how much she had to do with it and the relationship she has with Jake. If it is an abusive relationship, there's a lot of trauma there. And this might be, she's clinging on to him, because we do see that, right? People abuse the children and couples stay together. Why? Because there's that codependent relationship, even if it means danger to the child. So when I see that, I'm looking and saying, there's obvious things that are probably going on here, but I think in general, people like to tell their story, hoping that they'll get out from under. And it's like telling their buddies, who want to believe them, or family members who want to believe them. The investigator has to look at this and say, yeah, they might be telling the truth, but where, how does the truth fit into what they're telling you?
And guys, I posted this video up yesterday. Someone told me, they said, hey, Gans, tell me if you could look at this interview when they interviewed Jake and Rebecca the first time and they gave their plea. They wanted me to look at the grandmother on the left to see if I could read her lips. And I really couldn't read her lips. It was just very, just the angle wasn't there. But I did catch something else. And I want to add, so I want to show you this real quick. This is important. Actually, you know what I could do? Let me do it this way through the phone. You guys are going to have to bear with me. Joe, I'm going to enlarge the screen real quick, so bear with me. So can you see? Okay, so I want you to watch this for a second. So look at the video where Rebecca Haro gives her first statement to the press. They wanted to see if I could read the lips of, I believe it's the grandma that's to the left side of the screen. I couldn't read her lips, but when I was watching Rebecca Haro give her statement as she's trying her best to cry, look at when she stops and clarity hits and she says, I saw white. It's like the crying stops and she immediately looks up to see if her story is being accepted by the people in front of her. It's like a moment of clarity. I saw white. Or maybe it was a part where she's like, oh my God, I forgot to say I saw white. That's part of the script. And then she goes right back to crying again. Check this out.
I got him out of the car seat and I laid him down and so I could get his diapers ready. And somebody said, hold on, that's all I remember. And I saw white. And a hearing sound, I fell on the floor and
people had told me to look at the video. Sorry, let me so for me, when I saw her say I saw white, it was like a moment of clarity. I said, hey, maybe there was a script and she just recalled it. Or she could be looking down, then all of a sudden looking up to see if there was bi, and then she goes back down. Or I got to add this too. Why not? There could be a moment where she said, oh, let me not mess this up, because if I do, Jake's going to get me. So let me just make sure I add this one part, because that part is she got her head down the whole time, crying, and then all of a sudden she's clear. And she says, like all white. I saw all white, and then goes back to crying again. And I also want to mention something else I learned from another channel recently, is when people are crying, they don't cry between words. They kind of go between syllables. This one is like just kind of going between words. I thought that was very powerful and very observant from the channel that I was watching. But Joe, real quick, before we get to the next question, what did you think about that video real quick? I don't know if you got a chance to see when I did that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. A couple of things that we have right now in hindsight is that we know the father has given some excuse now that he rolled over and killed the baby. So he know that the baby is dead. And then we look at that interview that they gave when they were saying that the child was kidnapped. To me, watching that mother, that all of that was forced. She was trying to do her best to look how she thinks a mother whose child was kidnapped would look and how she would be upset. And that's what I saw. So you're right. The breathing, the intervals of getting out the words, the crying, the facial expressions and how they move before she says certain things all indicate to me that this was forced. And we have the benefit of hindsight to know the child is dead. So we know that this was a made up kind of a conversation.
Yeah, and again, what does it tell you when it's? So I want to mention something. We mentioned this in a show before, but just to elaborate, remember at the very beginning, yes, I love what Joe said. We're creating a narrative, right? And the first person to create that narrative gives them a lot of influence. First impressions matter. If I went and said Joe was a loving guy, that's the first thing I said about Joe. But then the other 4 qualities I give about Joe are crap. It doesn't matter because you're going to go ahead and filter the last 4 qualities based on what that initial impression is. Now, if I said, man, Joe will stab you in the back in a heartbeat and then give you 4 qualities that are positive, it doesn't matter because you're going to define Joe by that first quality. Initial impressions matter. So therefore, the initial impression of putting that narrative out there is extremely strong because it builds support that now the investigators have to be wary of because now that's an obstacle, right? I got to accuse a mother who's now got the support of the audience. That's why I think they were very upset with having that press conference. I think that they had their press conference afterwards, but you notice the guy said that's because they had their press conference first because now it's a race to get out their narrative. Because their narrative, if it sets too long, it builds momentum. So now they're coming out with their narrative because if they don't, you wait too long and then the narrative sets in and now people believe they're innocent as opposed to thinking they're innocent. And it's hard to change a belief.
Yeah.
I come up with this process because even in corrections, if I got an officer I think's getting manipulated, right? If you don't address them right away or her right away and kind of know what your concerns is, whether, I don't want to destroy my friendship with them. It doesn't matter. You rather be wrong and do the right thing than right and not do the right thing. So, the problem is if you wait too long, the officer starts to justify their behaviors. And now you're going against a belief that really isn't aligned with what we value. But unfortunately, the officer has found a way, maybe through cognitive dissonance, to allow that belief to exist. So the same thing with the public. They get out there, they push the narrative. Maybe that's why they went to Big Five. They went to Big Five because they knew it would get public appeal. Or a chance to get a public appearance, and then they pushed the narrative out there. And now I think it was a very smart move to do that conference because they had to put an obstacle into the narrative a little bit quicker because if they didn't, the public could settle in to that belief now, no longer thinking, but that belief that these two are innocent. And what are the police doing? How dare they question the mother and father like this? They're hurting right now.
Right. And let me just jump into that part, Anthony. From the criminal investigator's point of view, public opinion doesn't really affect my investigation because the parents, their child is missing. People are asking what's going on and they had to come up with a story. So they got family members. Hey, where's the baby? What happened to the baby? So they came up with their story. She was, punched in the face. That's where she got a black eye. This person took my child and that explains why my child is gone. And therefore I am a victim. Now that might help for family members to garner support. As a criminal investigator, I sit in the back. The more they talk, the more they say things, the better. Whether it's in an interview, a custodial interview, or whether they're on camera saying things, because every time they're saying things, they're now giving me things to go look at, to investigate. They're giving me statements that they're making, statements of fact of how things happened. In the background, my investigation might see, public opinion is, these people are really nice. But the reality is they just told us 6 things when we first met them. 3 different things came out in this conference. We're making observations. We have evidence, whatever that evidence may be, and that doesn't match what they're saying. So what we often see is a cascading of people's stories like this. The more they talk, the better. When I sit down with people in a criminal interview, I'm not there to be an adversary. I'm there to hear their side of the story. I am there to make a connection to that person so they trust me, so that they will lie to me, tell me stories. I don't care what it is as long as they're talking. Because while they're talking, they're telling me things. They're giving me fact patterns. They're giving me timelines. They're giving me concepts of what they saw happen. And then as those things change, now you have things to confront them with. And that's where the cascading usually takes place. So I tell a funny story in my class, my interview class. I say, if you look at the truth, if the truth is like this, no matter how convoluted the story, if everyone tells the absolute truth, the truth fits together perfectly, just like this. The problem is when somebody leaves things out of the story, usually things they're culpable for committing crimes or cheating on a spouse or whatever they did that's not right, that would cause them a problem, they leave that out. They tell you the whole story, but that one part. And I call that when the pinky's sticking out, because the investigator's looking at this going, boy, it really all kind of makes sense. But there's something there that's just not right. It's not fitting my fact pattern. It's not fitting what they said. It's not fitting what a witness said. And that's the pinky sticking out. And what I tell everyone is when you're investigating, you have got to examine that pinky until you're confident that it was an errant mistake. It was a factual mistake in the evidence you have or the way you interpreted it. But the reality is the truth, no matter what it is, fits together perfectly. And when anything is not perfect in somebody's story, that's our opportunity to go back and go investigate everything they said and find inconsistencies. Inconsistencies in people who are telling a story is that they will then change their story to fit the new facts. This is why we don't always give out our evidence. We tell them little bits, just enough to get them talking, even though we already know maybe we have a witness over here who saw something specific, or we found blood, or we found a weapon, or we found something in the search. And then we will introduce that later on into their story. And the truth, again, remember, truth fits together perfect. You can tell the truth 1,000 times over and over, and it'll always come out the same way. When that story changes, even a little bit, because they move towards whatever you've brought up to them, there's a reason that it changed. It shouldn't change. The truth should be the truth. And that helps us as investigators. So yes, public opinion is going to help them have support. They're going to see that support. It's going to bolster them. Their family members are going to stick with them. And, you know, the cops are just bad. They're just out to get you. They don't like you for 100 reasons. They're trying to blame it on you or whatever. But the reality is, in the background, as the investigators, that public opinion may decide how we go forward in our investigation with public appearances or statements or things like that. But the more people talk, whether it's in the room or whether it's out there in front of that podium, is good for us because they're telling us stuff.
Right. So I get, yeah. So what I meant by, and I think you actually kind of made it better what I said. So basically you got the commitment. I get that. But my biggest thing is, I know with the pressure of law enforcement, transparency, I mean, there's the community does have a stronghold, but you're right. An investigator, hey, I got a case, you know, and if it's going this way, it's going this way. But I think sometimes us as investigators or yourself, some of the stuff we get is just something doesn't feel right, but we can't explain it. We just know it. And I think when we're stuck in a situation where it's ambiguous, where it's not really that pinky, but rather, man, my experience is telling me one thing, I just can't get it out. And you want to cross from helping the individual to really just getting at them. There is a concern that, man, if I'm wrong and now the public will twist it like they could. And, you know, mother attacked by interrogator, why she's still mourning her missing kid. But you're right. So Joe, you prevented so much clarity. I want to make sure I spell myself out. So guys, what I meant by that was, it's not going to stop the investigator from getting the facts that they need to get. But I think a lot of what we do really is also experience while we're trying to get the facts. And it could slow things down, because I think when she made up the story, I think they knew pretty quick that the story was fake. I did. And I think they knew pretty quick, but they still went through hundreds of hours of footage and evidence, whatever it is, because they knew part of it was, we want to make sure, you know, we're on point, but we also have to make sure we're going against the mother and the father here. So let's be on point, because we don't want this to kick back on us, because had that been any other suspect, they may have moved a little bit quicker. But I think in this case here, but yes, I just want to get it clear. Joe, 100%.
And I want to back you up with your thought, because the other side of that is maybe not me, the investigator, but the leadership maybe in my agency, the political leadership in the town or the city, they may feel that pressure, and they may start to try and direct the investigation. Hey, take it easy on that mother, you know, look at other things. Absolutely, pressure can have an effect. I'm talking about on the ground to the investigator, but you're right. That pressure can certainly have, other, what are we going after a mother for? We look terrible now. I'm getting reelected and I'm looking like I'm putting up with this. And that's a reality for all of us, especially out there in the world of investigations.
Yeah, maybe, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe because I was a little blinded by that because of my position too. I am a high level appointed position. So I do take into context, however balanced, I'm very good at balancing this, is if I got to do something that could have a favorable light, but I'm really acting on instinct, I am going to go the extra mile. And then even if I'm wrong, I have justifications as why I had to go that route. And I wanted to mention something, just to elaborate on something Joe said, I don't want to miss. Remember, guys, pressure is subtle. So when Joe was talking about, and I think I mentioned this in the last show we did, but when you ask somebody, like when you're working with them, you may say, hey, what happened, blah, blah, blah. But later on, when you start getting facts and you try to put those facts together, you may ask a subtle difference in how you question. It's like, let me hear your side of the story. That's a bit different. That's a bit different because it's implying there's another side. And that pressure, if the investigator does it right, they know how to maneuver because they'll see where the person is trying to skip over because they know somewhere along the line there may be conflict. And I mentioned this yesterday's show too. If you have two parties that are separated and they may want to try to do what's best, sometimes the conflict is that, let's say if this is the case, Rebecca's going to want to assume Jake would go this route and try to do things based on what she thinks Jake would do. Jake is going to think, well, what would Rebecca do? And try to do things the way Rebecca would do it. And then all of a sudden, the stories, they don't match. Does that make sense, Joe?
That makes perfect sense. When people are telling the truth, when they've been truly victimized, that will come out very, very clear in their both of their stories will be the same. The detail now, if it happened when she wasn't home and it really happened, somebody really, or to him, and he found out she really got mugged, someone stole their kid, that will be evident in the conversations, and he's going to know her story because it really happened. When things are made up, that's when you can have that, especially in separation. You don't know what conversations they've had. You don't know what evidence is coming up. And they may try to, okay, how do we tailor this based on what I heard, what I saw on the news? What did I hear from this one? What's the attorney telling me? All those kind of things. Because when it's a story, it's going to change. And the truth doesn't change.
And guys, I just got a message. Catherine Guay, she made a good question. She goes, when were those missing kid posters printed? Seems unbelievably quick since judging by their clothes, it was within 24 hours. I thought that was interesting, if anybody knows that. So next segment, pressure points. Why Rebecca might talk first. So again, we're making predictions here, but as you could see, we could be wrong, but as you could see, we're kind of evolving what we're discussing to lead to this. So we're kind of explaining why, at least why I'm leaning this way. Okay, so I got to say the public perception dynamic, Rebecca seen as potentially less culpable compared to Jake's extreme evil image, again, is past. I mean, maybe we'll still find out more about Rebecca that can change that. But right now, Rebecca's image is nowhere near how we're viewing Jake right now because of promised faith. Promised faith is so important to this investigation. People have to understand that. The false narrative trap. This is a bit of a challenge, and I think Jake may have knew this. So Rebecca put herself in the center of an inconsistent story that's now proven false. And I think, and when I get to the question for Joe, just remember this, Joe, because I think that this was a way for Jake to maintain some control, because either way, she made the false narrative, and that could be a reason why she's sticking to it, because technically, minimal, she's obstructing justice. So I think that would be one of the first things that maybe if they prove that there was influence or pressure, they can get her to say, will you pressure to say the story, and really start to get an understanding of why that narrative was said. But she's sticking to the narrative. So maybe, in her mind, it's true. Maybe the funny thing is, maybe in her mind, she wants it to be true, because if it's not true, then, she really did this to the kid, or she really knew something and didn't do anything to prevent it. So maybe this is a safer story for her to absorb. And I've seen it happen, guys. I've seen people who have lost their children by their own means, and then still are convinced that the child's still alive doing something. Will tell you stories that the child's still alive, and then they have to go get a visit by mental health and be told again, what are you doing? You know what you did. It's their way somehow psychologically to avoid responsibility. Psychological control issues, prolonged separation from Jake may weaken any manipulation control he had, which we discussed. Legal leverage. Her lies to investigators create separate charges prosecutors can use as pressure. And I thought that was important because, and again, Joe, I'm going to give you the question as soon as you remember. I think on one side you put pressure on Jake, but on the Rebecca side, it's leniency and pressure. It's kind of the give and take that could be very, very challenging for someone who's not familiar with those type of interactions, because technically you're going to have a strong interrogator, goes hard, goes soft, goes hard, and it becomes very, it's a very powerful exchange. So I have some detailed breakdowns here. I have victim versus accomplice framing. So public jury may view her as scared, pressured, rather than willing participant. And I think that matters. Some people, may not agree with it, but it does matter when you're doing the interview. The credibility problem. Every day she maintains the false story. She looks more guilty and less sympathetic. So eventually I think if she decides that this, I'm not running with the story anymore, and she decides to say, this is what really happened, I think people will draw sympathy to her and hear me out, because they know ultimately now she's on the side to get Jake, and the enemy of the enemy is my friend. Just hypothetically. Isolation effect. So no contact with Jake means no reinforcement of whatever story they agreed upon. That's why I think he yelled, "I love you," because he knows he's losing control, and there's too much influence in the middle now. Investigators, separate lawyers, and then prosecutorial strategy, easier to offer leniency to someone perceived as lesser evil. And I think I related that to public pressure as well. There's no, if they went ahead and they said this, and maybe this is a good point. I'll bring the extreme. Hey, you know what? It's whoever talks first. Hey, Jake turned on his wife. Let's go with Jake. Let's give him the lenient sentence. And Rebecca, you're going away for life. People, I don't think, would agree with that at all, because of Jake's history and just what we now see as Jake. So I think if you don't agree with that, maybe the better option is this. Because again, it's not about finding the body as much as who did the act. How did this baby die? That's the key. And were you covering it up, Rebecca? Were you negligent? Was this really an accident? We need to know. And that's very important for the people that want closure. Closure isn't just finding the body. Closure is, yes, the evidence of the body matters too, but closure is getting that admission. Did that person, Jake, intentionally kill that innocent child? Now, Joe, first question I got for you is, and Joe, as I went through those bullets, take control. You can cover whatever you want from that. But I got two questions for this section. I'll give you the first one. How do investigators exploit the dynamic when one suspect might be psychologically controlling the other?
Well, I think a key there is to remove the danger. And the danger is, if they were still in the house together, he would have complete control. Now, psychological control, right? People say, okay, she's in a separate room. She's got attorneys. He's not going to get to hurt her. Psychological control is a lot deeper than that, than just that physical proximity. It will break down over time. There's no doubt about it. So if I was talking to her, and your point, Anthony, is 100% correct. How did the child die? Whose hands caused the death of the child, right? So if they were both involved in it, maybe it started out as something simpler. Maybe it started out as the child wouldn't stop crying and there was shaking, and then there was something else, and then it got out of control. And who knows? Who knows? If they both had hands on that led to the death of the child, that's going to change who's going to be held responsible for what. I know we see a lot of times where in this particular kind of a case, if she didn't actually kill the child, she's committed other crimes by hiding it, making up a story, obfuscating, obstructing the police, whatever. We want to get down to that part of it. And I think that can eventually break her away. And that's what her attorney would be working on with the prosecutor's office, where they're having behind the scenes conversations. Listen, if she didn't kill this kid, but she did all this other stuff, she needs to come forward and tell us exactly what happened, right? And that could break them apart, unless they both had hands into the child dying. Then they're going to have to protect themselves, because if it was both, eventually Jake's going to see that pull away from her, that, hey, she's getting out from under here. Well, you know, she did this that led to we're both going down. If anybody's going down, that I could foresee that happening. You know, when we talked about these other things, you know, what goes on with who actually did this as an investigator, especially a homicide investigator, you got to remember that the victim has no one to speak for them, especially in this kind of a case. That's what the investigator is. The investigator is involved in this wholeheartedly to be the voice for that victim, to find truth, to find out what happened, to bring some kind of a justice, which is often responsibility for what happened. You can't bring them back, you can't make them whole, but you can certainly stand up and hold those people accountable. So I think I would see all of that going on in the background. And if we watched this story evolve and he does have control over her, eventually that's going to diminish the longer she is apart from him. But we cannot, and I can't say this enough, anybody who's been involved in these kind of things can tell you that psychological control can be very, very powerful, even from long distance, depending on how long it's been going on.
Right. And then, Joe, I got this. I thought this is a good question, too, for this section. In your experience, because I know you've been through this, what's the breaking point for someone who's maintained a false story, and what finally makes them come clean? I mean, obviously, we touched on if you could play into remorse, guilt, or some balance of increased pressure with slight bits of leniency. I know that could play out, but also could be very confusing. But what really do you think gets the breaking point for someone who's maintained a false story, and what finally makes them come clean in your experience?
Sure. Well, when you look at this, like I said, there's people who are, they're not masterminds. They're just people that got involved in something and now they're trying to protect themselves. They made up a story. Eventually, as more facts start to come together and we see the story start to fall apart, there is a moment when somebody is standing there realizing that their story is no longer holding up. And that's not done by yelling in somebody's face, screaming. It's about talking to them, making that connection and letting them understand this isn't making sense. The evidence we have now compiled shows that that didn't happen the way you said. And the only reason you would say something that didn't happen is because either you're involved in the death or you're involved in the cover-up. And while both are bad, the death is obviously the worst. And this is going to come down on you now, on your head. You're making yourself look bad. You're going to get in front of the jury. They're going to find you guilty, and your life is now forfeit. If you didn't do this, the thing to do is to help us. The other part of this is I would be working on her being the mom, and I would talk about that child from that child's point of view. Where is that little baby? Did you love the little baby? Did you want to have this baby? Okay, you didn't want to have the baby, but you found you were pregnant. How did you feel when you found you were pregnant? Did you love the kid? What was the nicest thing that this little boy did with you? And tell me about a fun time. Get her mind out of that track she's on, thinking about this child as a human being and the innocence of her baby, and talk about where is that baby now. So that's the other thing. This guy going out looking for the baby, I would say that baby is evidence. You know, not having the physical body to present in a homicide case is one thing, but that body is a crime scene. And this whole I rolled over on the baby, well, you know what? You can tell that by a forensics examination. If the child was beaten, if other things happened that led to that death, maybe that's why we can't. How do you not know where you buried your child or where you disposed of your child's body? Well, I thought it was on this hill. That would be burned into your mind for the rest of your life. Serial killers can go right back to the place where they shallow graved somebody so that they can stand over the body and relive it. So this situation, I would certainly consider her psychological makeup separate from how she's controlling him. And I would talk about her connection to that little baby, whether she was involved in his death or not, if she just covered it up. And I would work on that angle. And that kind of psychological pressure is more than most people can handle, unless they're a sociopath. And those are very small and far between when we come across a sociopath. So working on this woman on that, That is usually when facts build up that they can no longer refute. That it's not just the cop saying something. This is what now I have facts, I have evidence, I have other stories. It starts to fall apart, and people see that, and they realize they can't go on with the lie any further. So one of the things I talk about, and I wrote a book about this, you're right, it's called The Interview. It's how to conduct a criminal interview. And when I talk about there's different things that we see when people can't withstand it anymore and the truth is almost ready to come out. You can see a change in their body language. You can see their breathing patterns change. You can see this look of, I can't believe I'm here. What do I do now? Well, someone who's telling the truth, whose child was kidnapped, is not going to display that at all. And therefore, this starts to build up on them. And then eventually you can see that the emotional strain can overwhelm them where they will break down. And it doesn't have to be, okay, I did it. It's just, you can see them, they'll break down into tears, sobbing. They'll fall apart emotionally. Their whole world comes apart. They're looking at their consequences, their relationship, the little child, and all those kind of things. And you can see people break down pretty rapidly. And that's usually when you'll get another story. It may be the truth. It may be a better version of the truth. There may be more facts involved, but you'll usually get something then that'll add to the truth.
Yeah, now I'm not going to minimize accountability, but I do want to mention something here too. So if you have a good partnership with the investigators and in the county jail, I could see all this playing out pretty well too. So don't forget, let's say we're continuing with this narrative that Rebecca can be easily influenced, because remember, if Jake could do it, there may be a vulnerability with Rebecca. So that means that the investigator who's the closest to her now can also influence, which means he can get, safely, they're trained to do this correctly, into her head. I love what Joe said about, hey, I can get her thinking about her baby, the best times, whatever it is, and really get into her head. So there's no escape for her because there's no one else she's going to be able to talk to. So she's going to go back to her cell and she's going to be by herself, stuck with the thoughts of probably what Joe put in her head. No counter influence, no one she could talk to. She can't talk to Jake. She's going to have to be thinking on this. And if she starts to break, I could, because obviously they're going to have her on watch. Got to be very careful at this time because Joe or the investigator is getting into her head. They need to pull on whatever she has, and it could be guilt, it could be remorse, and these are tough feelings to connect with. So now let's say Joe gets that opening, could be a brief window. You could get the officer who's watching her in county saying, hey, by the way, she's going to mental health right now. She's crying. And then Joe is like, we broke her. And Joe may want to come right back in or may let her sit on it. But it's all, this does take time. It's not something that's going to be done overnight because it takes influence. It takes the other party to be open. And then there's some counter influence. You cannot have counter influence there. You got to have a way where the person, after they go through that heated moment, because it is a very interaction exchange. It's a very heated exchange. When I say heated, just very, it's not aggressive, but very assertive. It gets into the person's head and they need to be able to go back and resonate with that, because that's what Joe is trying. Joe is trying to, or the investigator is trying to get in their head and then avoid any counter influence. And now I know this, I'm grooming or I'm prepping this person. Then the person comes back again and Joe continues until finally there's a break. And does that make sense, Joe? Am I saying it right?
It does. And one of the things that, there's all different theories in interview and interrogation. Mine, the way I have developed mine, the one I teach, train, and I write about, is that the whole idea is the investigator wants to create some kind of a bond with the person they're talking to. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be best friends. That doesn't mean you hang out together. What it is that you become, at some point, a lifeline for that person for this to come out the best that it possibly could, right? So that's why I'm saying you don't scream and holler. That's TV. That's nonsense. You connect with another person. You talk about how scary it must be in there. It must be horrible to be in, that people are saying you had something to do with killing your kid. And, but this happened. We know that the baby is dead. And I talk about the kid, and you become that connection because you're taking the place of maybe the spouse who's not there. They're in another facility. and you become that connection. I have had lots of people, once they get to the point that they realize, whether it's a custodial interview, and they say, I'm not getting out that door. I can see the cards are stacked against me and I'm still lying, but these cops know, and I know I'm not getting out that door. How do I make this the best I can for myself? Well, where are you going to go? There's your lifeline, the investigator, the one that's been there, that developed this relationship. Hey, I'm not telling you you're walking out the door, but there's lots of reasons that people do things. Not all of them because they're evil, horrible people. Sometimes things happen out of our control and we don't know what to do. Is that what happened here? Right? So you start to pose those kind of questions that are not, they're adversarial, but they don't seem adversarial. I'm just trying to get to the truth. Maybe you were victimized in all of this. Tell me so I can help you. Everybody has a side. Don't let people just make the narrative. Don't let Jake make the narrative of what you did, even if you had something to do with it. What was it? I'm here to help you, right? So you set that out there, that you're that lifeline to these people, and you can see some of them take it selfishly. Hey, I can get over on this cop, and you know what? If they think they're getting over on me, good. As long as they put themselves at the scene and they did something when before they did nothing. Now they're at the scene, they did something, and my investigation, my forensics, my statements, everything else I have are going to show what you did. Getting the why from you is their little bit of a wiggle room to give me that. Now, the investigation will usually show me the correct why, but the why is the hardest thing to get in an investigation. All right. So that's where I would look at this as she starts to break down. You be that lifeline. And that's what I teach, to create a bond with this person. Even if it's a short little bond, it's a bond enough for them to see you as my best chance of getting out from the worst that it could be to less than that.
Yeah. And I also like to think, so obviously there's a point where you're helping the individual, and then there's a point where you're outright going to make the accusation and still could help the individual. But I think it's also a point of identifying, am I battling against the fact that the person just has an ego and thinks that they're smarter than me? So maybe it's a different type of getting them to admit, because now it is a battle of this person really has no remorse, has no guilt. They're just very narcissistic and they think they know the system. So now I have to kind of step up and, they're not smarter than the system and try to, weaken their game. But there are some people where, it's not an obstacle, but more of something that can help us is that, you can get to their guilt. You can get to their remorse, like you're saying, using the mother card, and you can see if they're going to break. And maybe there is a softer approach that, come on, let's just get this over with. I can help you get this over with. We'll get this signed, sealed, and delivered, and then we'll figure out with your lawyer how this best could be delivered to the public. I can't control how they'll react, but we could do it in a manner that you feel is best for you, and to make sure that you motivate them, because maybe one of their biggest fears is, I want to say it, but now what happens next?
Yes, Anthony, 100%, because depending on what it is that they've done, there are lots of reasons that prevent people, even when they realize there's no way I'm going out that door, the cops have enough of a case on me. Now they have other consequences. Their thoughts often turn to those consequences. Imagine a preacher in your community who gets arrested for having child pornography, and half the people in the church stand up for him, the other half go against him, and you have all this evidence. How is he going to admit that? That's going to be the hardest part to admit. So you have to work that through with them sometimes. Sometimes you do. You sit there, because I have a theory when I teach this. I don't care what I have to do within the law to get a person to tell me. If I have to sidle up next to a disgusting human being so they think I'm their friend, that I'm understanding them, I want them to tell me what happened. I'm doing that for the victim. That is my purpose in these things. So when you see these things that kind of happen, if you can be that lifeline, it doesn't matter, as long as you can get them to say. But a lot of them will think, what do I do now? What's my family gonna say? I just lied to my family for 2 weeks. I made my whole family look stupid by standing up for me. How do I get over that? And if you can figure out how to overcome that, then you might get the confession. So there's so many psychological elements to getting people. Why won't they tell you? What would they tell you? What are their obstacles? How do you overcome those obstacles? All of those things is part of an interview when you're trying to get somebody to go for something that they did that's very, very serious. So keeping that stuff in mind, we do find that people finally get to the point where they realize, I'm caught, but how do I admit to this? And the more personally violative the crime, the harder it is for them to admit it. Okay, the harder it is for them to admit it. And conversely, when we're talking about these personality disorders, I made some notes here. I said that a sociopath, a person who has no empathy for another person's feelings or pain or anything like that, this stuff doesn't work so much on them because they could care less that they killed this little kid or raped that woman and buried in her in a shallow grave. They don't care. They were doing it for their reasons. These people, you go after them by pumping them up. Hey, listen, I don't know if you did this or not, but the guy that did this must be a genius because, we got the cops running in 14 different directions. We can't find a body. We don't have this. And you'll see their body language will change where you'll see that. That's right. I am smarter than you all. They may not see it, but say it, but you will see it in the body language and maybe that's who I'm dealing with here. So all of these psychological factors are part of getting someone to roll and then to tell you what you need to know.
I love that. And your ability to adapt and adjust as an investigator, each one of those obstacles, like again, with the narcissist, whatever it is, the person that views people like objects, then maybe I have to give them a little credit. And that could be very hard because what you're bragging about could be something against everything you believe. I got the next part here. I got Jake's strategic position, why he might hold out. So again, a lot to work with here, but extensive history makes plea bargaining more complex for him. I think he's the primary target, so prosecution likely focuses on him as the main perpetrator. Then you got the apparent cooperation may be calculated move to appear helpful while revealing nothing substantial. So again, we don't really know much about what happened out there when he was showing them or trying to show them where the body was. I mean, I'm sure that's going to come out, but I assume maybe that could have been a goose chase, but they did say they do know or they have an idea where they expect the body to be. But I just wanted to put it in there just to have it in there. Control maintenance, so court outbursts. Okay, we talked about the court outbursts, right? Potentially attempt to maintain psychological influence over Rebecca. So tactical considerations, due process focus. When evidence is strong, shift to attack a procedure rather than facts. I think I said this because usually when evidence is against you, the defendant winds up going against the credibility of the witnesses, even though the evidence is against them, or the due process, the timely fashion of things. Well, this should have been handed in already, and it's not. And now I'm putting in a violation on that, or I'm appealing it because this wasn't done properly. Yet at the end of the day, the evidence is there, but they don't want to challenge the evidence. So again, I figure people like Jake or their lawyers, sometimes when they know there's just too much evidence speaking against their client, they look for due process errors, or they really start to attack the credibility of the witnesses. So, if it ever happens where Rebecca winds up going against Jake, they may talk about the whole process with the investigators and how did this happen and really attack her credibility, go after her. She's the main culprit. There's just a whole mess of games that could be played with that when the evidence is damning against somebody, but usually the legal team's aware of that. We talked about timeline pressure, so legal deadlines can work in defendant's favor if they can wait it out. Leverage calculation, if he's going down anyway, cooperation might not offer enough benefit. And information control, he likely knows location of body, and that becomes the ultimate bargaining chip, which we discussed. That's why I thought when he was out there, he may have cut a bargain already, but I would still think because of his history and whatever it is, I really don't think they would be in a position to make that bargain at that point. So maybe he came in and gave it up immediately, or they talked about some Perkins operation, which I don't know if that's even true. No one's validated that, but basically some undercover who gave information. And it was funny because people say, well, why would someone admit to such a horrendous crime, especially in prison, when people, would be like, oh, that's disgusting, and they try to come after people for those crimes. It's because it gives them a chance to create the narrative that opposes the narrative that's already being blasted. So a lot of people think that they may keep things secret. No, I know you know about you. I know that when I came in, people know what I've done. So I'm going to go ahead and create the narrative right at the bat. Hey guys, I didn't do that. Was an accident. That was something else. I mean, they're going to create the narrative because at the end of the day, if they don't, it's going to be controlled anyway because the media's got a hand on it. So Joe, a lot there, but what's your read on suspects who seem cooperative but aren't actually giving up useful information, and how do experienced criminals handle interrogations differently than first-time offenders?
Well, anybody that's been through the system, been in the system, that has experience with investigators, has experience with interviews, inexperience with the law and court and how all these things work, they are at a little bit of an advantage because they understand where somebody who's first time around, they're new at this, they just don't have the experience to withstand things. They say things that they think in their head might sound really good, right? I'm going to say this and I'm going to stick to it. I say that all the time. Even I teach a class for police officers, internal affairs. And one of the things that I talk about is that police, for the most part, are professional witnesses. We go in, we testify in all kinds of courts. We get good at it. We understand the processes, the procedures, how the attorneys work and all of that kind of thing. And you see, these officers say, well, you know what, if they ask me, I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I say, well, the problem is we can all say that until you're sitting in the hot seat. Then it all changes. Then the dynamic changes. So a person like this, that's, why is he trying to hold back? And what's his position? If he admits it after he's told all these lies, he knows that then he's gonna suffer the consequences, and their job is not to suffer consequences. When they start reaching out, okay, you might have my blood at the scene, you might have my fingerprints on the baby's body, you might have found the weapon in my car, but you know what? You didn't collect it correctly. You didn't do it within 2 hours of the warrant. You didn't whatever. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, you have all that evidence, but you didn't do it right. Well, that doesn't mean they didn't do it. This, I think, if you peel all this other stuff away and we just look at our court system, we look at how much the court system really does bend over backwards to protect defendants and give you your rights and make sure your rights are protected. I think if we look at the Koberger case, the guy who killed the girls and the guy in Idaho, they fought the DNA. They fought everything in that case until they realized the judge kept it all in. Okay, now what do we want? What's our biggest concern? We don't want to get executed. So I'll plead guilty, right? That's my biggest goal right now. For this guy, like I said, when they find the baby's body, if they do, because it can be, there's something now about maybe he put it in a garbage can and then it got moved, and you know what happens to garbage when it goes. You may not ever find that child in a condition to determine what actually happened. And the longer it goes, the longer time that the body is dead, the evidence is lost of that kind of thing. But forensically, they could look at that child and realize the child might have suffered a horrific death, not just rolled over. If dad rolled over, does that happen? It does happen. We do see this. People are sleeping in bed with their kids and they roll over, and it happens. But that's something you call 911 for. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. You try and protect that child. So that body of the child, finding that child, can reveal a lot more about what happened. So when I teach criminal investigation, that's one of the things that I talk about, is that your crime scene, whether it's the body of the victim, whether it's the room, whether it's the weapons, whatever it is, your crime scene can tell you a lot about the psychology and what was going on in the head of the person who committed the crime by looking at how things were done. What did they do? What was said? How did they injure the person? All those kind of things can tell you a lot about the person, and it might totally contradict everything else you've said up till that point. So he is right now still trying to protect himself because this is bad. He does have a criminal history for what you're talking about. And if that does actually come in where he severely injured another child, and now this child was severely injured and killed and then dumped in a shallow grave or dropped in a garbage can, this guy's looking at some very, very serious consequences. And a person who's narcissistic, a person who's sociopathic, a person who's a controller, they are going to try and protect themselves at all costs until there's a benefit to not. So, okay, I came up with a story because I can't withstand the evidence, the facts that are coming at me now. So I was scared. I didn't know what to say. I'm still innocent. I simply rolled over on my baby and I panicked. Okay. Could that be understood? Could an investigation show that's what happened? It could. When you find that child and you find that the child was brutally beaten, stabbed, bones broken, whatever. I don't go into the horrible details of what people do to innocent people. But if we start to see all that, that takes all of that narrative. Now he's lied. And now he's going to go to trial. And all that evidence is going to come up. And he's looking at a very serious, when we're talking about killing people, we're talking about the death penalty in many cases. Now, maybe not in this particular state. But the reality is that's a very, very severe punishment, or going to prison for the rest of your life is very, very serious. So people like this will often fight to the very end to protect themselves. That wasn't me, wasn't there, don't know what you're talking about. And then the evidence changes. Well, it was me, I was there, but I didn't do it. It was me, I was there and I did it, but I did it for a good reason. Their stories go through phases as these things happen. And we already see they didn't know what happened. It was a kidnapping. Then he rolled over on the kid. Remember the truth. If he rolled over on the kid, he should have just said that. I rolled over on the kid. This is my child. I can't believe this happened. You'd call 911. They didn't do any of that. They made up a story, and we still don't have the child back.
Yeah, and guys, just going back when Joe said about the credibility, I mentioned about the credibility. I mean, I even see it in the prison setting where sometimes inmates will just make up a lot of false allegations against someone. They don't stick, but they're not found unfounded because you can't disprove it, but it didn't happen, but there's not enough evidence to disprove it, so it's usually unsubstantiated. And then later on, when the inmate's charged with something, they'll try to throw all those allegations, which turned out never to be true, but just they weren't disproven. And I think that does even with credibility, you can have someone that says, well, if you're going to bring up Jake's history, hey, the lead investigator, who was that? Pangaro. Yeah, I heard he was in rehab back in 2002. Can we explore that? They will do whatever they can to shift from the evidence that's in front of them to the credibility of the people that are in charge of the findings. So I got I got two more segments left, Joe. A lot here, but this is great information. The prosecution dilemma. So some of the strategic challenges is baby recovery is imperative. Family needs closure. Prosecution needs physical evidence. I think that's extremely important. You got the false narrative problem. If they give Rebecca leniency for her lies, does that compromise case integrity? Public pressure, because again, if I could say, hey, Rebecca, listen, I know you made this story under pressure. I believe he was influencing you. Listen, I can make this obstruction of justice disappear, but you got to give me a little something on Jake. And then the lawyer said, well, hey, what was that deal? Maybe she only said it because you gave her some out and then she went with the out. Doesn't mean it's true or not. It's just you gave her a benefit she couldn't refuse. Public pressure, community wants accountability, but also wants the real killer punished most. Remember that. They want accountability, but they want the real killer punished first. That is the real honor to Emmanuel's memory, is who killed Emmanuel. Timeline constraints, speedy trial, rights versus need for cooperation, and prosecutorial calculations, risk assessment. Is it worth offering significant deal to get body location, get the murder charge for the one? Evidence, or both. Evidence confidence, strong enough to proceed without cooperation, but cooperation makes it bulletproof. Public relations, how to handle community expectations for justice. People may not want Rebecca to have a deal, but we may need it for something that we're really trying to hold the greater accountability towards. And legal strategy, separate charges, murder versus obstruction, allow for different plea approaches. So, Joe, I got two questions here. I'll read them both if you want to answer them both. If that's okay with you, if you can do that. From the prosecution side, how do they typically approach the who do we flip decision when they have strong evidence but want more? A little bit different than the question we asked earlier. And what's the sweet spot for plea offers? Enough to motivate cooperation, but not so much that it looks like justice isn't served.
Right. Well, I think a lot of the deals that are made in courts from the outside, for people that don't see the prosecution, don't understand what's going on inside the case, there's always a chance when you go to a trial with a jury, and maybe you have a sympathetic jury, maybe you have a case that you don't have the body and you have stories. Now it's a he said, she said. Maybe you paint the police as incompetent. There's a chance you might not get the conviction you're seeking. And that's a reality. As justice, for my job as a criminal investigator, mine is to find the truth of what happened and then hold someone accountable. All right. I'm going to charge someone based on my investigation. Then the prosecutor has to take that information, and he or she then has to build a case that can uphold that charge, that uphold that person is responsible for this, and they now pay the penalty for their actions. So what we don't always see as people on the outside of the system is that, why would they do that? Koberger, why would they not have him explain why he targeted those kids in that house? Why would they not have him tell us where is the weapon, right? Did he plan anything else? Why would they let him just plead and walk away? Because when they looked at it, they had 4 people murdered, and they could lose it in court with the stories. He's autistic, and maybe he didn't do this and he didn't do it. They could maybe lose those charges, or we have a guaranteed plea. Now, I don't want to say that money is involved in this, but it also is millions and millions of dollars for these big cases that the prosecutor has to, weigh that as well. We're going to get a conviction. So let's make a deal to the person who is the least culpable here, so that we can get a more solid case. So you said something there that's absolutely true. And I say this when I do criminal investigation. There's nothing better than outstanding physical evidence that points right at the suspect and their motive. But boy, is that enhanced when you have a statement or a confession in writing or on video where they give it up. And now it matches all the evidence. It matches the case. So prosecutors look at all of those kind of things and try and figure out the number one thing that they're seeking here is justice for the victim. That's what the investigator wants. They want the person who did it held accountable. And the prosecutor wants to make sure someone is held accountable in court and pays the penalty. When we look at these 2 people, if it turns out they both had hands on that baby, it led to his death, then they should both be held accountable. And then maybe you don't make a deal at all. Maybe you go to trial with what you have, if your case tells you they both did something. If the case tells you that Jake did the murder and Rebecca simply covered it up or did some kind of abuse, if we let him get away with murder because we lose the case at trial, or we lose some evidence, or we lose some story, then we don't bring justice for the victim. So we may decide, out of a sense of being pragmatic, let's give her a deal so that she will testify and provide details of what happened that could match the forensics. She could tell us where exactly this happened. Maybe it happened in a barn 3 houses over, and we didn't even know that. We go there and we find evidence there. Maybe other people knew things about this or saw that, and she could give us that. So she might give us a better timeline. So there's lots of things you can get. In most cases, when you cut somebody a deal, you want something powerful from them. That can be more evidence, that can be their testimony, or that can be some understanding into the motive or where evidence might be. And that leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. She knew about it. Maybe she helped bury the body, but the kid was already dead. She didn't kill him. She's under this guy's influence. Let's get the killer. She's going to be found guilty of something in the world. Disposing of a body, knowing about a body, lying to the, she'll be found guilty of something, and they will take some penalty out of her. I would guess. It seems like that. So let's say it that way. But the key here is you make a deal to make sure you bring justice for the victim. And sometimes what it looks like from the outside looking in is not the same as looking all that evidence going, there's a chance we might not get murder 1. We might get manslaughter, 7 years, 8 years on something, some nonsense, and a stone murderer who should go either the death penalty or spend the rest of their life behind bars might get a break because we couldn't make the case. So all of that goes into making a prosecutorial decision. And I've been a part of these when we sit down as a team and we lay out our case, we lay out our evidence, we talk about who our witnesses are. How well are they going to testify? How well does the evidence hold up with any mistakes made in the investigation that we're going to have to answer for? Is that going to bring up a little shadow of a doubt on some of the evidence or some of the statements? All of that goes into the decision, to the matrix, to decide offer a deal or not.
Yeah, and it's funny, two things. You get a witness that has a questionable history, been in and out of the legal system. You know, they're like, oh, they got great testimony, but you know what? Can't sell that. I'm going to get that person to be believed. And I also know of this too, like where, let's say Rebecca does flip and the lawyers go back to Jake. And this is where you see the shift is lawyers may say, hey, Jake, we believe Rebecca flipped. Jake will be like, you know, have to resonate with that. And then you get the detective like, or the lawyer, the lawyer will be like, hey, how good of a mother was Rebecca?
Mm-hmm.
Now you start to now wind up shifting.
But I'm going to say at that point, if this guy
that does happen, right?
What's that?
Would you believe that? Do you agree that happens?
Oh, it absolutely happens. There's no doubt about it. When you have nothing else to go on, you throw mud on the wall and you see what sticks. So if I can't get out from under the evidence, then I'm going to say the cops were corrupt. The cops did it wrong. The cops hate me for lots of reasons. My wife is just getting a deal. She's making it up so that she can get out from under. They're going to do all of that. And part of the prosecution, what they need to do, it's just like using an informant. You use an informant or you use an undercover a person who's working with the police, and they do a lot of things and they get a deal, right, for working with the police. Of course, that looks like they did it because they were getting a benefit. The prosecutor has to deal with that probably right up front is the best way. Mr. Jones, you were helping us out here, and then did you get any benefit? Yes, they told me that if I would tell the truth, and it depends on how you frame it. You have to build the credibility into why the person told you, not maybe their background, which is horrible. You have to rehab that on the stand, and that's all part of the prosecutor. And all of that goes into the matrix to figure out, well, that's our number one witness, and they're going to, boy, you've got a bad criminal history. How are we going to rehab that enough to have the jury not hate him and think he's lying and then lose the case? So that's where all of these undercurrents of a trial come in that don't always make sense to the public. Just go get him. We know he did it. Well, that's not our system. Our system is very refined, and it's filled with protections for defendants as we want it to be, right? If you're a defendant, you want to have every opportunity to prove your innocence. Unfortunately, we often see how they can use that to get out from under something that they really did, to escape culpability.
Yeah, and guys, in the prison setting, a lot of us are very familiar with this because we have institutional charges which follow the same procedure. There's paralegals, there's representation, there's appeals and pleas and all this other stuff. So we're very familiar with maybe not as formal because so when an inmate gets charged institutionally, they're really not allowed to have outside involvement until they appeal, until they go through the process, do their appeal, and then exhaust the appeal within the institution. Then they can bring a lawyer involved. But usually we have paralegals, we have representatives inside the system that actually will probably give them better representation than outside because they know the system. But we go through the same process, not as formal, but we do a lot of these, and we're very aware of due process errors and how things can happen in the real courts also happen inside the facility. All right, last part, and then we have the closing, is scenario planning, who breaks first. So this is the prediction framework that me and Joe came up with. So I thought Rebecca would be more likely because psychological pressure, false narrative, there's a little bit of a leverage there. So there's a trap there. Sympathetic positioning, she's the mother. So how the investigator wants to play that. Jake's resistant, too much at stake, experienced with system, control issues. Scenario breakdown, I believe Rebecca talks first, amidst a false narrative, implicates Jake as primary perpetrator, claims fear, manipulation as mitigation, provides body location for significant plea reduction, or If she doesn't know, I still think that she can maybe have an admission from him, even if she didn't see it happen. He could have admitted to her in anger. You know, he could have told her maybe at first it was an accident, but she knows his history and maybe she doesn't believe it. And then eventually he's like, fine, this is what I did, but you're going down with me. So, I mean, whether he admitted it to her or she's seen it, I think that she has knowledge. And hey, believe it or not, even if he admitted it to her, accident or not, they could always figure that out later. But I got her saying that she told him he did this.
Right.
Then we got Jake. Okay, so I have, if Jake talks first, strategic move to control narrative before Rebecca can. I think that, and he could. Guys, someone kills a kid, they can't love anyone. I'll be honest with you. If you can kill a helpless kid, I don't think you have empathy. I think Jake could be a sociopath. I think there's no remorse. He's done it twice. So again, you think he has love? No, he's using love as a manipulator. So again, strategic move to control narrative before Rebecca can. That's why maybe he went out there first, because he knew if she broke immediately, she's going to get the greater leverage. So let me cooperate and take control of the narrative. And again, first one tells the story, huh? Potentially implicates Rebecca more heavily than expected. Uses body location as ultimate bargaining chip. I think that would be more for him, because I really do think he's responsible. Or you have neither talks. Both maintain innocence, attack due process, which we talked about. Prosecution proceeds with existing evidence. Case becomes much more complex without cooperation. 2 questions here, Joe. And guys, the reason why I'm reading Joe 2 questions is also kind of a little long on the show, but Joe, I was able to give Joe these questions ahead of time, so he is aware of these questions. So Joe's very meticulous with his notes. And then guys, feel free to add your comments some of these questions as well. So Joe, the 2 questions I had here was based on everything we've discussed. Who do you think breaks first and why? That's the prediction side. And what would surprise you most about how this case develops from an investigative psychology standpoint?
Okay. If we're going to go now, in a previous show, we talked about having an investigative hypothesis, which means as the investigator, you look at initially what you have, the report, the scene, all this, and you're going to come up with an idea of what you think happened. Okay. Based on what I'm seeing, it looks like this happened. Now I'm going to start investigating. Well, you can't just hang on to that hypothesis forever. If evidence takes you in a different direction, you have to change your hypothesis. So looking at this, I'm gonna say, looking at his history, looking at the dynamics of this relationship, everything that I'm saying looks like more than likely, if both of these people are involved, he's the one who actually did kill the child, and she was aware of it. She saw it. She was there. She tried to protect him. She's influenced by him. She's traumatized, whatever. I think eventually she will break first. Excuse me, because of as the weight of this case comes down on her, and I'm sure they're working on her for as much as she's willing to talk to them at this point, talking about that child. Where is that little baby right now? Think about him, what he's going through. That's a very, very powerful conversation to have. So I think she's going to break first, and then he may struggle to make a deal. Holding that, I'll tell you exactly where the baby is. Just don't give me the death penalty, or something to mitigate a little bit about what he did, because who knows the entire story until we find that child. And what was your second question, Anthony? Please repeat that.
Oh, yeah, before I give you the second question, I want to add one thing. So, guys, remember, Jake is an experienced abuser. So if he killed the child, I think they said the child was alive from, let's say, somewhere between the 5th and the 14th, right? So they believe there's a time frame here. I think if it all happened in one day, then maybe he was impulsive and got rid of the body impulsively. But because they believe there's a timeline where the baby could have been dead within that timeline, not necessarily the 14th, I think there is a plan here. So, like, I get it. People could think, well, he killed the body and he could have acted impulsively to hide it. They think the body didn't die, the baby didn't die that day. They think the baby's been dead for some time. So that I think that time was to come up with the plan. I truly do. And who knows? Maybe Jake told her one thing and did something else. I mean, he's strategic in nature. Maybe he told her, do this and let me take care of this and I'll protect you from not knowing. This way they can't come at you.
Sure.
But then he's also given himself the power.
Sure. The cycle of abuse is something that's going to have to be looked at here. And that's the psychological power he might have over her. What kind of an abusive relationship do they have? Or is she mutually abusive to the child and they're both sociopaths? All that's going to come out in the investigation. And when we look at the psychological breakdown is really to understand who these people are, who are the players you're dealing with, so that it informs you what questions to ask, how to view the evidence, what evidence to look for and to go. So a simple thing that I made a note right here, what benefit could she give them by them making her a deal? If she was to say, well, this happened between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, and we realized the baby was dead at 3:15, and he took the baby and was gone. He was gone for 20 minutes and came back. Well, that certainly narrows down the area we're going to go look for that baby, right? So we had people that threw guns at our cars and they threw a weapon, when they were running from a crime scene. How do you figure that out? So what we would do is, okay, it's a wooded area. We would take a brick that weighs about the same amount as a Glock. We would stand at the road and throw it and see where it lands in the woods, and then go start there and start looking around, right? So the same thing here. She might be able to tell you he was gone for 20 minutes and he came back without the baby. Well, now you're within a 20-minute radius of how he can get there by foot, bicycle, car, or airplane or boat or something. Where can he go in 20 minutes out and back to dispose of a body? So a simple thing like that. So psychologically, being with these people makes all the difference, to be able to gauge their body language, the words that they use, how they use it, their connection. I think you were very astute to pick up on him walking and going, "Hey, I love you." You would think two innocent people might say that to each other, but that certainly does sound like a manipulation. Hey, remember, I'm the important one here and I love you. Don't give me up. Did they talk about it? Did they both decide to dispose of this child? Were they both hands on to the death? Or was there one side more than the other? And all of that eventually, hopefully, comes out.
That's why I recommend you get this book right here, Manipulation Decoded, available now on Amazon, and this book as well, because even though it's written for the prison setting, trust me, the lessons are applicable elsewhere. I want to add one more thing, just to revisit something. I mean, as I said, he could have not told her where the body was in an effort to tell her, "Hey, I'll protect you," but he actually did it for his own survival, because he knew he committed the crime and ultimately he's going to be the one they're going to come after. So at this point here, I'm going to protect myself so she won't have the leverage. All it will be is a he said, she said. So I think, I think he's also very strategic in his way. And then his bargaining will be the body. That's all he has. His bargaining will be the body, where her bargaining may be some admission. But still, he could still say, this is the crazy thing, because that's why you need the body. He could still say, it was by accident. They still got to prove, like Joe said, the why, the intent. And they know if you get that baby, it shows you the pattern. It shows you what happened. It can reveal that it wasn't an accident.
Right. An accident. If somebody had an accident and then they behaved stupidly and panicked, that's different than purposely murdering a child.
Yeah.
Right. So that body, and that might be the reason he, doesn't know exactly where it is. But you never know. He might give it up as part of a deal for him. Tell us where the child is. Let us bury the child. Do what's right by this kid, and we'll make you some kind of a deal.
Yep. And then, so the lessons we take away for a closing was, we talked about the psychology of co-defendant cases, how false narratives become traps. Because I think, that hurt Rebecca because she put herself in the center of a false narrative. Strategic cooperation versus genuine cooperation. We discussed that. Timeline pressure dynamics, which we discussed. Final question for you, Joe. Final one. What's one thing people don't understand about why suspects in cases like this eventually talk?
I think from my experience, it really comes down to their understanding of how much trouble they're in. Sociopath, again, totally different animal. How they deal with understanding that what they've done to people is different. But that's only 2% of the population. Everybody else is kind of in this. They didn't expect this to happen, and they tried to protect themselves. They did something out of anger or intoxication, and they're trying to protect themselves. It's going to come down to, okay, this happened. Here's the reason. I'm going to mitigate it as best I can to limit my exposure to punishment, right? Limit my exposure to punishment. Somebody who rolled over on their kid by accident and killed him would be filled with remorse, would have called 911, in my opinion, would have tried to save the child. We didn't hear anything about CPR. We didn't hear anything about that. So I think the bottom line is this: whoever killed this child is going to try and protect themselves as best as they can. And if it starts to fall apart, they will maintain that to try and lessen the punishment that they're going to get for their action, to mitigate their actions for a lesser punishment.
Yeah, just let you know, me and Joe are still going to follow closely on this case. We were looking at Andrew McGadden. We did a video on that. I did a video a little bit about Carly Gregg recently, which is doing well. And then obviously we were following up on the shooter case out of Minneapolis, which I think we've done enough on that for a little bit. So if you guys have any other case that you're interested in, please message us. We'll try to work on it. You know, you could email me and Joe. So my email is gangianthony@yahoo.com. And Joe, what's your email?
Joe@pangarotraining.com. Joe@pangarotraining.com.
Let me put them both here. Hold on. I'm going to put it both here because if you guys want us to cover something, let us know, because I'll be honest with you, Joe@pangarotraining.com, because this helps us. There is and I'm going to give you mine. So hold on. This is Joe's. All right. And then let me give you mine. Mine's simple. Let us know what you want us to cover. Email us both so we both can decide together what we'd like to touch on to next. I can even bring in more guests. I have a few new people that I have on standby. This is my email. There is a case I am following right now a little bit. There's a case of an 11-year-old girl who gave birth. They believe the stepfather was the father of the baby. They just arrested the grandmother along with the mother and the stepfather. I'm interested in that case a little bit. I think there's a lot to discuss there, especially when it comes to dealing with sexual predators. Also, if you guys have questions about that case, send it to us so me and Joe know what areas we could specifically target and if we feel comfortable discussing those areas. Hey, Joe, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yes, I'd like to tell everybody to go take a look at my police-based podcast. It's on Yahoo. I'm sorry, not Yahoo. It's on YouTube, youtube.com/@BlueHeartWebcast. You can go see a lot of interesting things I talk about, training and this and that. And then I got 2 books out that you might be interested in. So today we talked about a lot of interview stuff. This is called The Interview. This is how to conduct a soup to nuts criminal interview. It talks about the psychology, talks about all the things that we kind of touched on here, how to do it. There's a lot of stories in here, specific interviews that I've done. It's available from blue360media.com or on Amazon. And since this is a group of people that like true crime and whatnot, my other book, The Investigation, also on Amazon or blue360media.com, is a unique take on how to teach criminal investigation. What I do here is I investigated a very brutal double homicide, and I go through it like a novel, and then I stop and teach different parts of criminal investigation using that as the backdrop. As itself, it's a very interesting story about a double homicide, but it also teaches you the ins and outs of criminal investigation. So get either one of them from Amazon or blue360media.com. I think you'll like them. They'll help you if you're an investigator or you ever have to interview anybody or investigate anything.
And guys, I have both their books. They are excellent reads. Again, even the 2 books I have on the market. I mean, you never know what you can learn just by venturing outside of what you normally would read, because there's a lot of stuff that we teach that does apply to the real world. You just got to figure out, how that applies for you. The techniques that we teach are techniques that can help make you safe. It helps make you more alert to what most people won't see or most people don't want to see. That's the funny thing about what we do. We see what most people deny exists. As always, guys, the show is taped up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.